Hunain wa ba'd. Today, inshallah ta'ala, we continue from where we left off maybe 6 weeks or 7 weeks ago, right before Ramadan, in the Seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we are coming towards the end of the Seerah. I suspect maybe by the end of June, kind of shake things up a bit and invite a new audience, because some people are feeling that they've heard this from me too many times and they want to move on. Honestly, there's nothing more entertaining and enjoyable than telling his story, alayhi salatu wasalam. No, this is actually my 8th or 9th time. I can't actually, I can't remember anymore, but something like that, and telling his story. And I find it to be one of the most fascinating human stories that I've ever told, if not the most fascinating. So what we stopped at last time, I'll go a quick recap, was the reclaiming of the Holy Land, of Mecca, Fatah Mecca. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, after the betrayal of Quraysh to the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. So the Treaty of Hudaybiyah that occurred was designed to allow the Muslims to speak about Islam freely within Arabia without the fear of being massacred, persecuted, or murdered. And it served that purpose because there was a clause within the treaty that allowed for peace. However, Quraysh had a problem with it because within 2 years or less of this treaty, the number of Muslims within Arabia skyrocketed. They went from a very small group that they weren't very afraid of, or they didn't feel that they were a threat, to a group of people that outnumbered them, or started to outnumber them. So they got very scared. So it made them a little bit antsy, and they ended up betraying the treaty or breaking the treaty by murdering people from Khuza'ah who had accepted Islam as they were on their way to Umrah. Prophet ﷺ would find that out. Abu Sufyan would attempt to lie his way through renewing the treaty to prevent the Prophet ﷺ retaliation. Prophet ﷺ already knew about it, so that didn't fly. ﷺ planned Fatah Mecca very well. His plan was to minimize the possibility of bloodshed. That was the whole goal. The goal was that the Prophet ﷺ was going to make it to Mecca with no bloodshed, and then enter Mecca as peacefully as possible. And if you look at the numbers, only 16 people fell that day. And this is basically the Prophet ﷺ entering Mecca with an army. You would think that, the possibility of this happening was very low, by the way, because the last time someone tried to enter Mecca with an army, things didn't go too well for them. If you go back to the story of Ashab al-Fil. So the Prophet ﷺ was able to achieve that objective. We went through the story of all of it. He entered Mecca. The idols were removed. He forgave the people of Quraysh, all of them, even those who he had ordered their execution. Came back and asked for forgiveness, and the Prophet ﷺ offered them all forgiveness, such as Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl, and Safwan ibn Umayyah, and Hind bint Utbah. All of them were pardoned by the Prophet ﷺ. I don't think I told the story of Utbah and Utaybah ibn Abi Lahab. I'll tell you that story today. I can't remember. Maybe I did, but I'll tell it anyway. Utbah and Utaybah, this is the interesting piece. So they're the sons of Abu Lahab. Abu Lahab is the Prophet ﷺ's uncle. Prior to Islam, Utbah and Utaybah were both engaged to the Prophet ﷺ's daughters, Ruqayya and Kulthum. And once the Prophet ﷺ became prophet, announced prophecy, Abu Lahab ordered them to divorce his daughters out of spite. So they did. And subhanAllah, this is a story I think that is worth maybe contemplating, especially for sisters who have daughters who haven't gotten married yet. Imagine Khadija radiallahu anha, both her daughters are engaged to two suitable gentlemen. Utbah and Utaybah they were of the right age, from the right family, of great nobility. They're good men. And then they get divorced because of the Prophet ﷺ's da'wah, because of what he did. Now you can imagine in a parallel universe or in a different storyline of a lady whose daughters are going to be divorced because of a choice her husband made, is not going to be too thrilled about her husband's choice, aside from the Prophet ﷺ's story. And you would think that maybe Khadija would tell herself, well, they got divorced for the sake of Allah. It happened because we're standing by Islam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, يعوضنا خيرا, He'll grant them a better response. You see, Ruqayya didn't marry for a number of years later. And Kulthum didn't marry until Ruqayya died. Like Kulthum, it took her a decade before she got married again. Like she was engaged and she lost her engagement because of this. And it didn't immediately Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted her another spouse. No, it was a decade before she got married. She got married to Uthman ibn Affan after her sister Ruqayya died. That's why Uthman dhun Nurayn, of the two lights, because he married the two daughters of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. When you think about this story, I find in it a very important piece of wisdom and a gem that you can take with you. Just because you do something for the sake of Allah and it harms you, doesn't mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just going to give you what you wanted immediately. This is an important piece. Very important. Khadija radiallahu anha, Ruqayya and Kulthum. It's devastating for women when an engagement is broken and they didn't want it to be broken. It's very harmful. It's harmful to the man. It's much more hurtful towards the woman. Much more. Just how things are. For the sake of Allah, she lost her engagement. She could tell herself, well, Ya Rabb, I did it for you. So in her mind, she may have an expectation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will immediately grant her a better spouse right after that. No. She didn't get a spouse. Just 10 years? 10 years? She never, by the time she got married, she was too old. She didn't have children. That's the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam's daughter. Okay, that's his daughter alayhi salatu wasalam. When we do something for the sake of Allah and give up things that we like, or we lose things that we want for the sake of Allah, be very careful of having false expectations. This is a trap the shaitan lays out for you on your way to God. As you walk towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, shaitan has to lay some traps out. He lays this one. This is a really good one. It's a very powerful trap. He gets you to believe that because you're doing things for the sake of Allah, you deserve a rose-petaled red carpet pathway forward. You deserve everything because you stopped drinking and you stopped doing this and you stopped doing that and you became a better person. You change things around for the sake of Allah. Where's my red carpet? Where's my paparazzi? Where's my reception? Why am I not being celebrated? No. You did this for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Understand what that means. You need to take a step back, understand what that means. That means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yet again has blessed you with the blessing of guidance. Above everything else He's given you, He is on top of that giving you guidance. So I don't understand where the idea of deserving more comes from, except from a nafs that is extremely, extremely selfish and very, very vain. The Prophet ﷺ's daughters were divorced because of Islam. And it took them a while before they got married again. One of them was over a decade before she married again. And she never bore children because of it. And that's the story of Kulthum, the daughter of Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Utbah bin Utaybah ibn Abi Lahab continued all throughout his prophecy and his time in Mecca and Medina, continued to work against the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam in horrific ways. And once they were caught, they stood in front of him shaking alayhi salatu wasalam in fear from what they had done. And the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, in a known story, would point out to them, you remember when you did this to me? You remember when you said that about me? My cousins. My cousins. You remember when you divorced my daughters? My cousins. Remember when you tried to murder me? Remember the qasida, the piece of poetry that you said about me? My cousins. And they stand there and they're shaking. And He forgives them, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And He forgives them. And they accept Islam. And He gives them gifts, alayhi salatu wasalam. Because it's His family. And in Arabic they say, it's your family, you spit upwards, it's on your face, and you spit downwards, it's on your lap. It's all on you. Like there is no gain. There is no gain in turning against your family. There's no gain. There's nothing to win. It's everyone loses. You're the first loser. So you let it go and you forgive and you move on because it's your family. That's what he did, alayhi salatu wasalam. He just stood in front of them. Why? Why did you do this? You could have been beside me. Why did you choose to be like this? Why did you harm me and hurt me so much for so long? They didn't have good answers. Most scholars are of the opinion that they accepted Islam and became Sahaba. So radiyallahu anhuma, as he would love us to do, alayhi salatu wasalam, because they are his family. In a really cool story narrated by Imam Ahmad, on the day of after Fatah Mecca, two of the people whom the Prophet ﷺ had ordered to be executed in Mecca, even if they were found holding on to the curtains of the Kaaba. There was only 10 of them. Two of these men, they ran They didn't actually get out of Mecca, but they ran and sought refuge in the house of the Prophet ﷺ's cousin. Her name is Hunain bint Abi Talib. Abu Talib is the Prophet ﷺ's uncle, and Hunain radiallahu anha, one of the great Sahabiyat. So the Ali radiallahu anhu would see them. This is what the story goes, is that they were hiding in Mecca. Ali ibn Abi Talib sees them. He says, I was commanded. So he pulls his sword. They run, he's running after them. They're running, he's running after them. They see the house of Hunain. They knock on the door, begging, let us in, let us in, let us in. We seek refuge in your home. So she opens her house. They enter, she closes the door. Ali is standing there, knocking on the door. Ali is what to Hunain? Her what? Think about it a little bit. Her name is Hunain bint Abi Talib. Yeah, so he's her brother. So he's her younger brother. So she's knocking on the door and she's saying, open up, open up. The Prophet told us to do this. And Hunain would say, قَدْ أَجَرْتُهُمَا. I've offered them my protection. So Ali laughs. وَمِنْ ذُ مَتَى تُجِيرُ النِّسَاء. And since when do women offer protection? Al-ijara, the concept of offering your jiwar, offering your protection, was something that was specific for men. So Ali said, you can't offer jiwar to these people. Women don't do this. Open the door. The Prophet told us to execute them. فَقَالَتْ قَدْ أَجَرْتُهُمَا. I'm telling you, I've offered them my protection. So they're arguing. So Hunain says, لَأَشْكُوَنَّكَ إِلَى رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. I'm going to go to the Prophet ﷺ. So she closed the door and locks it. The two men are inside. And she goes over to the Prophet ﷺ. The story goes, the Prophet ﷺ had his daughter Fatima, and he was having a shower. So he was behind the bush, and Fatima was standing there with the curtain, with the towel, and he was getting dressed. So Hunain is coming calling, she's his cousin, from afar. Ya Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah. So he looks over the bush. فقال أهلا Hunain. Yes, welcome, but he's trying to get dressed. What do you want? ما تريدين? فقالت يا رسول الله رجلان أجرتهما. Two men and I have offered them my protection. يقول علي لا جوار لي. Ali is saying I don't have the right to do that. فضحك النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام. قال just اذهبي قد أجرنا من أجرت يا هانئ. I offer my protection to the ones whom you offered your protection to, يا هانئ. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And this was the first time historically that a woman offered jiwar to men, like offered protection to men, and it went through. And it was a precedent that never happened before. And the Prophet ﷺ accepted it, and the two men were pardoned, and they went, and they didn't accept Islam, by the way, and they left to Damascus. Hopefully they're not my ancestors, but still. Well, I mean, it's going to be too bad if they were pardoned by the Prophet. So that's Fatah Makkah. He would stay, I'll tell you the ending of the story basically. He would stay around within Mecca for 19 nights. Is the number that we have for the majority of books of Seerah. Other books will give you other numbers too. As I pointed out before, the numbers, when it comes to numbers, there's lack of accuracy because people didn't have the apps that we have today to keep track of things, so they have approximations. We think it's around close to 3 weeks that he stayed in Mecca, alayhi salatu wasalam. He stayed in a tent. The Sahaba would come and tell him, Ya Rasulullah, هلا ذهبت إلى بيتك? Why don't you go to your house? فيقول وهل تركت لي قريش بيتا? Why did Quraysh leave me a house? Quraysh not only had they torn down the house of his marriage, of his wedlock with Khadija, where his children were born, they had sold the land to someone else. And alayhi salatu wasalam never reclaimed it. He didn't go after it because it was there's conflict of interest if he did that, alayhi salatu wasalam, as the leader. For him to go after his personal belongings or personal possessions would be conflict of interest, so he never did, alayhi salatu wasalam. And he stayed during Fatah Makkah in a tent, and he would go back to Medina, alayhi salatu wasalam, just like he promised the Ansar. He could have stayed in Mecca from that day on. He could have moved the capital of his country from Yathrib or Medina Munawwara to Mecca al-Mukarramah, but he didn't, because he gave his word to the people of Medina that it would always be with them. He told them, بَلِ الدَّمُ وَالْهَدْمِ الْهَدْمِ. My blood is now yours, and I'm buried with you. I will live with you and I will die with you. And he went back, alayhi salatu wasalam, to Mecca, to Medina. After getting back to Medina, before he actually made it there, I'm going to tell you this story here. So I'm telling you all these things that are happening. You see, as is everything I told you today that's happening. In the meantime, when you see the movie, and in the meantime, as this is happening, somewhere in Ta'if, if you ever go to Saudi, Ta'if is not too far away from Mecca. There are two tribes by the name of Thaqif and Hawazin. They are cousin tribes. And Thaqif and Hawazin have always been the rivals of Quraysh. They've always wanted the honor of serving the Kaaba or being the protectors of the Bayt al-Haram. They've always wanted that. They, in history, had raided Mecca with Quraysh in it a number of times. The last time they raided Mecca, the last time they prepared an army and raided Mecca, trying to remove Quraysh and run and occupy Mecca, was during the Prophet ﷺ's life when he was 17 years old. He recalls that the first time he ever pulled a bow and an arrow was during the war where he was protecting Mecca with the people of Quraysh from Thaqif and Hawazin. He remembers this war, ﷺ. That was one of many. They had done it many times before. So this rivalry was real. They really, because if you occupy Mecca, and you're the one who takes on yourself the responsibility of the service of the Bayt al-Haram, and before that, obviously, the idols that were around it, you had a lot of power. Quraysh was very powerful because of that. So the Prophet ﷺ enters Mecca, removes Quraysh, or removes what Quraysh was. See, Quraysh is still there. It's just in a different suit now. Because he ﷺ is from Quraysh. And so is Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and Talha and Zubayr and Ali. They're all from Quraysh. So now it's just a different suit, but it's the same idea. But Thaqif and Hawazin, their idea was now, since they're fighting, like Muhammad and Quraysh are fighting, this is our chance to pounce. We have to do it now. So they put together an army of 20,000 people. How many were the Muslims at that point? 12,000. So tell me, when they won in Badr, what was the ratio? It was 3-1, right? And they won. And in Uhud, technically speaking, before the guys ran down the mountain, they were winning. What was the ratio in Uhud? Anyone remember? What are the numbers in Uhud? So 700 were the Muslims. What was the number of the Quraysh? Around 4,000. So what's the ratio? There were 3,000. Sorry, so it was 1-4. My bad. There were 3,000. It's 1-4 or 1-5. Then in Al-Khandaq, when they won Fil Ahzab, what was the ratio then? Well, that was ridiculous, right? That was 1-8. That was 10,000 versus 1,500 people, right? And then on the day of Mu'tah, where they didn't really lose, I don't even know what the ratio was, because they only sent 3,000 people and there was 250,000 on the other side, and they still didn't lose. So the ratios that they've been stuck with over the years have been ridiculously high. 1-3, 1-4, 1-8, 1-50, and they were fine. What is the ratio right now? Over half. They are over half. They were like a piece of cake. This is not going to be a problem at all. We have been winning wars with the highest numbers we've had was 3,000 people at a time. Now there's 12,000 of us, and there's only 20 of them. This is not going to be a problem at all. And I'll show you the verse in a moment to understand why this battle is talked about in the Quran. Only within 1 or 2 verses in the Quran for a very specific reason that we should learn. But you need to understand the story. So the Prophet ﷺ became aware, obviously his intelligence was working. They never stopped. He was never naive, ﷺ. He knew immediately that Thaqif and Hawazin were preparing for all this. Once he was done, he packed up, he moved towards them. He didn't wait for them to come to Mecca. He didn't go to Medina for them to later on come and occupy Mecca. He went immediately to neutralize the threat. So he marches towards Thaqif and Hawazin. And if you remember, let's go back even a little bit further in what I talked about. When the Prophet ﷺ was going for Fatih Mecca, he didn't tell people where he was going. If you remember the story that I told you. He didn't tell people. He kind of spread rumors that he was going for Thaqif and Hawazin, for Ta'if. So the people in Thaqif and Hawazin were like, why? Why are they coming to us? So they start to try to put together an army, because they were scared that he didn't end up going there, alayhi salatu wasalam. But Thaqif and Hawazin now had an army anyways. Like, well, now maybe it's our time to pounce. Let's see if we can pounce. So the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam marched towards them. Now, the way it worked is when you go to Ta'if, and you'll find this if you ever go to Saudi and you go from Mecca to Ta'if, that after maybe 50 to 60 kilometers outside of Mecca, you start to enter in a very different landscape. The landscape is very different around Ta'if. It's very green, very green. Mecca is very dry. It's mountains and rock and sand. When you come closer to Ta'if, it changes. It becomes very green. It's like you're not in the same country anymore. It's valleys and it's rivers, and it's actually very beautiful. It's a very beautiful part of the world. Sheikh Hunain comes from there. You can ask him about it. It's a very beautiful part of the world. So when he's coming there, alayhi salatu wasalam, as he's going towards the Ta'if, there are a lot of valleys. So they came to one valley, and the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and the valley is the valley of Hunain. That's the name of. That's why the battle is called Hunain, because that's the area. He comes to the area of Hunain. It's a valley. You have to go down like you're walking on a flat land, and then now you have to actually go down. So before he gets there, alayhi salatu wasalam, he's like, let's be very careful as we go down here. So we be very careful. I want the commanders to take this very slowly. But as I said, the ratio was so easy. They didn't really, for a moment there, they got a little bit loose with things. They let their guard down for a moment. He said, be careful. Go one group at a time. Send spies or people ahead of you to let you know how things are. They didn't do that. And Khalid ibn al-Walid was up front, so he just charged down with the front part of the army. They didn't do that. Now Thaqif and Hawazin, as the Prophet ﷺ kind of suspected, had laid themselves perfectly, had positioned themselves perfectly within the valley of Hunain. That's where they were, waiting for the Muslims to come through, hoping that maybe they come through without the proper preparation, without seeing them, which the Muslims did. And as the army enters the valley of Hunain, just as the majority of them are in, they jump them. And they flank them from behind and from the sides. And it turns into complete chaos. Khalid ibn al-Walid that day would fall. For the first time in his history, he would fall. He would fall to the ground, unconscious, covered by leaves, not seen by the other army, and that's how he didn't die that day. That day, the only reason he didn't die is that when he fell, as they were ambushed by the army of Thaqif and Hawazin, he fell off his horse and he ended up under a leaf or an old tree, so he wasn't seen, and he was left as people were running back and forth because he was unconscious for a couple of hours. And he was extremely, extremely wounded. Khalid would stay wounded for months after this battle. Like it would take him months to actually stand on his feet again, which I'll tell you a bit later in the story. But imagine the ambush. The reason I'm telling you the story, imagine Khalid. When you think of Khalid ibn Walid, you're thinking of almost the invincible warrior. Khalid that day, not only did he fall, he fell unconscious and almost died. This is how bad the ambush was. It became so chaotic that everyone started to run. The Muslims had no sense. There was no more organization. They had no idea where people were. The banner had fallen, and people just started to run, just getting out of the valley. The Prophet ﷺ was left in the middle of the valley of Hunain with a handful of people. A handful of people, amongst them his uncle Abu Harith ibn Abdul Muttalib, and amongst them his other uncle Al-Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib. Only a number of people who were surrounding him ﷺ were left. Everyone else were running. It was very dangerous. He could have been killed that day ﷺ. So he started to call on people. The loudest voice that he had, he started saying, أنا النبي لا كذب أنا ابن عبد المطلب إلي عباد الله. I am the prophet, there is no lie about that. I am the son of Abdul Muttalib. To me, O servants of Allah, come back to me. Ali ibn Abi Talib tells us, قال فكان يومها أقربنا إلى العدو صلى الله عليه وسلم وكنت يومها أحتمي به. Ali is with him. He said that day, the closest one of us to the enemy was the Prophet ﷺ. And on that day, I sought refuge in him. And on that day, when I got really scared and it was very heavy, I kind of stood behind him ﷺ, hoping for his protection. That's how bad things turned. And that's how brave he was ﷺ. He was raising his voice, أَنَا النَّبِيُّ لَا كَذِبْ أَنَا ابْنُ عَبْدِ الْمُطَّلِبِ, to people to come back to him. And people weren't coming back. Al-Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib is one of those men who have foghorns for a voice box. He had that heavy voice, and he started to call, Ya ma'shar al-ansar, Ya ma'shar al-muhajirin, Ya ma'shar. The Prophet ﷺ says, no, don't say that. قل يا أصحاب بيعة العقبة, يا أصحاب بيعة الشجرة, يا أصحاب سورة البقرة, أين بيعتكم? This is what you say. Say, oh, the people who gave their pledge on the day of Aqabah. See how far he went back, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This to me is very meaningful. I talked about this Friday actually. It wasn't even planned, honestly. SubhanAllah, when I put the khutbah together, that piece wasn't even on my mind. It just kind of occurred to me as I was. That the Prophet ﷺ would remind people of this bay'ah. At that moment, if you were to go back, that bay'ah was done 10 years before. It was a decade prior to this moment, this bay'ah. That's how far away this was. But he sat with the Ansar and the Muhajirin who were with him, and they pledged that they would protect and they would fight And they would not run. And they said yes. Bay'at al-Shajara, which happened on the day of Hudaybiyah, is not that far away. It's only a year and a half or 2 years before, when they pledged that they would go and they would fight for the blood of Uthman radiallahu anhu. Surah Al-Baqarah is the surah that says, وَقَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ وَلَا تَعْتَدُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُعْتَدِينَ. So remind of that surah. أَيْنَ بَيْعَتُكُمْ? Where's your pledge? So Al-Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib starts to raise his voice, calling, Ya ashab bayat al-aqaba, Ya ashab bayat al-shajara, and they start running back. And they start running back, and the valley is flooded again with the Muslims. Just in time. Just in time. I'm going to tell you something that happened during all this, before the numbers came. So this is where Mecca is, and this is where Al-Ta'if is. This is the valley that they're going through, and this is how they kind of ambushed them from both sides. I had more pictures actually of Al-Ta'if, but I don't know where they went. I have to figure out who deleted these slides. Maybe they're on a different file, because I can't find the slides that I took. There's actually a lot of pictures. Al-Ta'if is a beautiful place, and there are pictures of the valley itself. I guess for some reason today I didn't have time to actually go back and look at it again, but it's there. Let's move on. I'll come back to this in a moment. So as the Prophet ﷺ is in the midst of this, as Abbas is calling upon people, him ﷺ within very few people, Ali ibn Abi Talib and a couple of men are standing, and they're defending, and they're trying to fortify themselves not to get killed. And Abbas is calling, and the Muslims are coming back slowly, but at complete chaos. A lot of Muslims fell that day. The Prophet ﷺ all got killed. Within that period of time, before the Muslims actually came back and they were able to regroup again, there was a man by the name of Shaybah ibn Uthman ibn Talha. So Uthman ibn Talha, you should know their name. Uthman ibn Talha is the guy who had the key of the Kaaba and didn't give it to the Prophet ﷺ initially. And then the day of Fatah Makkah, the Prophet ﷺ took the key back and then gave it back to him. And it's in his family till this day. Shaybah had a chip on his shoulder. He wasn't happy. He accepted Islam, but in his heart he couldn't stand the humiliation that occurred to his father. So he went with the Prophet ﷺ. He acted like he was all committed, but in his mind he was going to assassinate the Prophet ﷺ whenever he could. In the midst of the battle of Hunain, he pulls his dagger. Shaybah ibn Uthman ibn Talha. He pulls his dagger and he slowly starts walking, and he's coming closer to the Prophet ﷺ, hoping to find a moment to do it. He's saying to himself, اليوم بطل السحر. اليوم بطل السحر. Today is the day where his sorcery will fail him. This is what Shaybah is saying. Today is the day where his sorcery will fail him. He's like, he still thinks it's something beyond prophecy. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As he's coming close with his dagger in his arm, the Prophet alaihi wasallam turns to him. ويقول يا شيبة أريد بك الخير وتريد بي الشر. I want good for you and you want evil for me. أريد بك الخير. أريد بك الخير وتريد بنفسك الشر. Actually, it's actually both. It's actually both narrations. Interesting. Actually, I never thought of it. That's actually both. I want good for you and you want harm for yourself. أريد بك الخير. I want goodness for you. وتريد بنفسك الشر. And you want harm for yourself. يقول فما زال يقول لي استغفر الله يا شيبة. Ask Allah for forgiveness يا شيبة. قال فما زال يقول لي استغفر. He kept on telling me استغفر الله. قال حتى صار وجهه أحب الوجوه إلي. Until his face became the most beloved face to me, to my heart. صلى الله عليه وسلم. فقلت يا رسول الله أستغفر الله وأشهد أنك رسوله. I ask Allah for forgiveness and I bear witness that you are his prophet. أقاتل معك يا رسول الله. Do I have the permission to fight with you? فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم نعم يا شيبة. Yes, stand by me. فقاتل معه شيبة. At the end of the battle of Hunain, the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام come to Shaybah. قال أرأيت يا شيبة. You see Shaybah. لو فعلت ما أردت لدخلت النار. If you did what you were hoping to do, you would have been from the people of Nar. وإنك اليوم لمن أهل الجنة. And today you're going to be one of the people of Jannah. احمد الله يا شيبة. Say الحمد لله يا شيبة. فجلست أقول الحمد لله. الحمد لله. I didn't make the mistake of sallallahu alayhi wasallam trying to kill him in the middle of war. He's trying to assassinate him in the middle of war. Not any war. No. Probably one of the most chaotic moments within battle that he had experienced, alayhi salatu wasalam, aside from Uhud. Like you heard the story of Uhud, very chaotic, very problematic, it was very bad. This was very similar to it. And yet, someone who was supposed to be standing by him is pulling the dagger to kill him, alayhi salatu wasalam. And he still finds, these type of stories are the ones that overwhelm me a little bit. Because I don't know that there are people in the world that would have patience for someone like that. Wallahi, sometimes someone comes up to me after Salat al-Jum'ah with a little thing and I'm ready to swing. Yeah, sometimes it'll be just it'll be a criticism that I've heard too many times and I'm ready, I'm already losing my mind. Alayhi salatu wasalam, in the middle of battle, he's lost, everyone's gone, and the person who's supposed to be covering his back is pulling a dagger, wanting to shove it in. The Prophet alayhi salatu turns to him and he tells him, I want khair for you. You want badness for yourself. And I want khair for you, but you don't even know what's good for you. And I know what's good for you, I want what's good for you, but you don't know what's good for you. I almost feel the Prophet ﷺ is saying that to everybody. Like when you think about it, when you think about his life, ﷺ, it's like he's saying this to everyone. I want what's good for you. You just don't know what's good for you. You want what's bad for you. You keep on making the wrong choices. You're harming yourself. Listen to me because I want what's best for you. Listen to what I'm telling you. You'll be better. You'll live better. You'll be happier. Stop harming yourself by making the wrong choices. He still had time to say that in the middle of a war. In the middle of war. I don't know. I would have just killed the guy. And then gone after his father later on. Because what a horrible way to raise your son to be such a traitor. But he didn't. He won him over, alayhi salatu wasalam. And Shaybah ibn Uthman ibn Talha will continue to be one of the great warriors of Islam. And he would die a shaheed years later for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. See that transition? To me, that's his magic, alayhi salam. You want to call him a sorcerer? That's his magic then. Yeah? If you want to call him that, if that's the name, if someone wants to use that to describe him, alayhi salatu wasalam, well, that's his magic. The way he was able to affect people, the way he was able to turn hearts, the way he was able to reach you in a place where no one else was able to reach you. Just to come to that one piece inside of you that needed remedy and just pat on it and just say it's okay, and then the person would change, and then the person would find meaning for themselves, and they would. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He had so many opportunities to be just, firmly just at moments, and he didn't. He chose to be merciful. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These are the verses that exist in Surah Al-Tawbah. لقد نصركم الله في مواطن كثيرة ويوم حنين إذ أعجبتكم كثرتكم فلم تغن عنكم شيئا وضاقت عليكم الأرض بما رحبت ثم وليتم مدبرين ثم أنزل الله سكينته على رسوله وعلى المؤمنين وأنزل جنودا لم تروها وعذب الذين كفروا وذلك جزاء الكافرين. Indeed, Allah has granted you victory in many moments, during many events and battles in your lives. However, this is what the ayah is saying. On the day of Hunain, إِذْ أَعْجَبَتْكُمْ كَثْرَتُكُمْ, when you became vain because of your numbers, when the disease of ujub found its way into your hearts. There are four major diseases of the heart. Four. Number one is vanity, ujub. Number two is kibr, arrogance. Number three is ostentation, riya. And number four is envy, hasad. There's almost no disagreement on this amongst the scholars of this discipline. These four, if you find ways if you remedy them, if you fix them, if you heal them, then the rest of the diseases of the heart will go away. They'll just kind of start to fade away on their own. But you have to take care of these four major ones. Ujub, vanity, what it means is when you feel full of yourself. Vanity is the way you see yourself, not in comparison to others. It's just the way you see yourself. Arrogance is the way you see yourself in comparison to other people. So they're different things. Vanity is what I feel that I'm worthy of praise, that I am the center of attention, and that I am the spotlight. And that I am worthy of being praised and being thanked because I have done so much and have achieved so much. So it's my view of myself. That's vanity. Arrogance is where I think I'm better than other people. I may not be great, but I'm better than fulan. Or even maybe worse than that, a group of people. These two are very problematic, and everyone has a certain degree of them inside of them, and everyone has to get rid of it. Racism is just collective arrogance. That's all it is. It's collective arrogance. Instead of being individual arrogance, it's collective. Instead of me thinking I'm better than all of these people, one person is I'm better than all these people who come from the same background. So it's an arrogance where I'm generalizing over a large number of people. So what happened to the Sahaba on that day, this is what the Quran is saying, إِذْ أَعْجَبَتْكُمْ كَثْرَتُكُمْ. When you looked at your numbers, you're like, we'll be fine. You became vain because you had higher numbers. Because before that, if you go, let's go back to Surah Ali Imran when he talked about Badr. What did he say? وَلَقَدْ نَصَرَكُمُ اللَّهُ فِي بَدْرٍ وَشُو what? وَأَنْتُمْ أَذِلَّةٌ when you were humble. You had humbleness, you had humility. Maybe one of the reasons they had humility is the numbers were small, so they actually were able to generate proper humility and humbleness. So Allah granted them victory. Hunain, they felt a little bit 12,000. They're 20, we'll be fine. And you remember? We won when we were like 700 of us. There was 1,000 of us. This will be nothing. So they dropped their... This is very important. You would think that they were entitled to do that. A little bit, maybe a little bit. Maybe after 10 years of struggle. What has it been now? But what year is this? This is close to year 8, right? End of year 8. 13, that's 20, that's 11, 13 years at the beginning, and we're coming to almost 20 years. 20 years of the Prophet ﷺ, of the struggle. Multiple battles where they always had the lower hand, and they stood their ground. They felt for a moment, yeah, I mean, it's okay. Have a little bit of arrogance, a little bit of vanity. No. We dropped our guard just for a minute. We dropped our guard just for a minute. It's just for this one. We just went in the valley without listening. No. You make a mistake, you don't do your job, you fall. Fall. Doesn't matter who you are. Doesn't matter who's with you. Doesn't matter what merit you got. Doesn't matter. You don't do your job the way you're supposed to. You disobey the Prophet ﷺ. You allow corruption to enter inside. This is one of the scariest stories in the Seerah. Actually, it's one of the scariest stories in the Quran. I find it extremely, extremely scary. Why? Because I'm imagining an army filled with all of these amazing names. Everyone was there, right? This is Hunain. No one was not there. In Badr, there were certain people who didn't make it just because they weren't there that day. Not everyone was there. Same thing for Uhud, same thing for Khandaq. But on the day of Hunain, everyone was there because everyone was there for Fatah Makkah. Everyone attended Fatah Makkah, everybody. On the way back, everyone was still there. So Abu Bakr, Uthman, Umar, Uthman, Ali, Talha, Zubayr, Sa'id, Abdullah, everyone was there. You're talking all the big names. And yet a little bit of vanity would enter the hearts. The whole army would fall. The Prophet ﷺ came close to dying. And the Quran would record it. إِذْ أَعْجَبَتْكُمْ كَثْرَتُكُمْ فَلَمْ تُغْنِ عَنْكُمْ شَيْئًا. And it did nothing for you. Your numbers did nothing for you. It benefited you in no way at all. وَضَاقَتْ عَلَيْكُمُ الْأَرْضُ بِمَا رَحُبَتْ. And this wide earth that was in front of you became so tight, and you felt you were suffocating inside of you. You had to run. ثُمَّ وَلَّيْتُمْ مُدْبِرِينَ. And then you turned your backs and you ran. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would descend His serenity and tranquility upon the heart of His Prophet and those who stood by him, and He would send troops that you could not see, and that He punished the disbelievers, and that is what they deserve. وَذَلِكَ جَزَاءُ الْكَافِرِينَ. That is the due diligence of the kafir, of the disbeliever on that day. But He pointed this out. You became vain. It didn't help you at all. If the Sahaba with the Prophet ﷺ, after 20 years of perseverance, for 20 years of perseverance and striving in jihad, allowed a little bit of ujub to enter their hearts, and they were punished for it immediately. Now, what are we going to say, really? If all of our efforts are somehow corrupt, da'wah cannot be corrupt. It can't. Da'wah that has somewhere in it an agenda or a bias, da'wah that has somewhere in it an unhealthy competition or unhealthy competitive streak or direction, da'wah that is not purely for the sake of Allah, da'wah that is not focused on serving people and only serving people, is corrupt and it doesn't do anything. Which is why we haven't been able to make the progress we want to make as Muslims. Because if our ancestors, our teachers, for a moment let their guard down and allowed a little bit of vanity to make it inside their hearts, just happy with the numbers. They were just happy about the numbers. They didn't say it. They didn't even say it. They just felt it. Like, we're good. There's 12,000 of us. We'll be fine. They depended in their hearts for a moment on something besides Allah. For a moment. Immediately they fell. Immediately they fell. And the Quran would document their fall. The Quran we read this verse in the Quran. Every Ramadan you have to hear it recited. إِذْ أَعْجَبَتْكُمْ كَثْرَتُكُم. You don't want to hear it. I'm pretty sure if a Sahabi was wrong, they didn't want to hear it again. They don't want to be reminded, yeah, we shouldn't have done that day. Every time, I'm going to read it again and again and again so the mistake doesn't happen again. So that we don't allow ourselves to be corrupt. Because once you bring arrogance or vanity or envy or riyah into any act of worship, whatever that act of worship may be, you corrupt it. And once you corrupt it, it no longer, there's no barakah in it, it doesn't serve its purpose, and it will eventually fail. Which is why we have to be very, very careful and very, very clear. You have to continuously watch your intentions, watch your heart. Why are you doing what you're doing? What are you hoping to achieve? Who are you serving? Who are you fearful of? Who are you hoping to be there for? Why? It has to be for Allah. You have to remove from it. You have to remove from it any self-service. I'm saying this because it's just, we have to do better. We have to do better. We have to do better as Muslims. We have to. We have to understand that any act of da'wah is sacred. The sanctity, the holiness of the acts of da'wah has to be protected. Those who are going to be performing this act have to be properly trained and taught. They have to learn to rid themselves of these problems. And if they're not ready yet, then they wait until they are. Because the moment these actions are based on something different, they're not fruitful anymore. And if you don't believe me, read this verse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala points out to the people, to the Sahaba, أَعْجَبَتْكُمْ كَثْرَتُكُمْ. You liked your numbers. You became vain because of your numbers. What did your numbers do for you? فَلَمْ تُغْنِ عَنْكُمْ شَيْءٍ. It did nothing for you. It was never about numbers to begin with. Vanity, a little bit of vanity, a little bit of admiration, just a little bit of self-admiration. Wallahi ajib, ya Shaykh. Wallahi, I feel that sometimes we're in a different galaxy from what this verse is talking about. A little bit of self-admiration caused them to fail. What are we going to, well, Allahi, what are we going to say? I don't even know how we're going to explain what it is that we're doing. But this is what the ayah says, and this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explained to them. And just be very careful in your life. If you do something for the sake of Allah, do it for the sake of Allah. Expect nothing in return. Listen to me very carefully. Expect nothing in return. Not only that, be very clear on the fact that you want nothing in return. And if something is given to you, return it because you want nothing in return. Be very careful about this. You're going to take care of somebody. Take care of them for the sake of Allah. Do not expect them to thank you or to be grateful towards you or to praise you. Just do it. If you're doing it for the sake of Allah, do it for the sake of Allah. Or else, tell them, I'm not doing it for the sake of Allah. I expect 1 and 2 in return. You can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. You can't do it for the sake of Allah, but I also want in return a good reputation and people to remember me in a good way. And people, no. I'm doing it for the sake of Allah and only for the sake of Allah. Then you want nothing in return. The people of older, our Salaf, when they did something for the sake of Allah, they actually put an effort to make sure that no one knew that they were doing what they were doing. So there would be no way for anyone to thank them for it. So it could be actually fully for the sake of Allah. إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ لَا نُرِيدُ مِنْكُمْ جَزَاءً وَلَا شُكُورًا. We don't want from you payback or gratitude or thanks. We're just doing it for the sake of Allah. Take it and leave. Take what I'm helping with and go. Don't come back. I don't want anything from you. What I want is from someone else, not from you. That degree of selflessness is what makes sure the acts of da'wah and service within the Muslim community are successful. And without that, we're going to have a problem, which we already do. We definitely really do. And this has to be dealt with somehow. After the day of Hunain, after the Muslims heard Abbas and they regrouped and they charged down that valley, and the Prophet ﷺ organized his lines. It was a swift victory. It was swift. It didn't take much. One of the stories of Hunain, the Prophet ﷺ, as during this, he would pick up a handful of soil from the earth, and he would throw it and say, "Shahat al-wujuh." May the faces all be defeated today. And the people on the other side from Hunain, those who didn't die, said every one of us had sand in their eyes that day from the Prophet ﷺ. And he stood his ground ﷺ with his Muslims, and they were victorious. And Thaqif and Hawazin, out of desperation, had come out to this valley with all of their warriors, and they brought with them all of their wealth. This was a tactic the Arabs used to use to make sure no one ran. It's a very interesting tactic, actually. It's actually been studied militarily a couple of times by historians, where if this was like, live or die type of battle, where this is the last, they wouldn't just go with their army. They would bring their children, their wives, their livestock, their gold, everything, and they put it right there. So if you ran, you left your children and your wealth behind. So you're not running. You're going to fight until the end. This was their tactic. And when it was a big deal, that's what would happen. You would find two armies fighting, and everyone was there with everything. The winner takes all. So Thaqif and Hawazin, to make sure that people stood their ground, brought everything and lost everything. They lost everything. The amount of bounty and loot that was taken after the day of Hunain was insane. The number of stories that I have in the books of hadith, and I narrated many of them over the last year and a half, of the Prophet ﷺ just giving away wealth, and the incidents that occurred as he gave away the wealth, but I'll tell you some of them, a number of them, inshallah, but within this halaqah, is very high, because he was given, the amount of bounty that he had to distribute amongst Muslims was just very high. And we're talking about livestock, talking about sheep and camels and gold and just a lot of wealth. So when that was brought to him, alayhi salatu wasalam, he started to give the wealth away. And amongst the people he would give to the newer Muslims, like Safwan ibn Umayyah, for example, and like Abu Sufyan, Sakhr ibn Harb. He would give them, which would later be documented in Surah At-Tawbah as وَالْمُؤَلَّفَةِ قُلُوبُهُمْ. Zakah is given to the fuqara and to the masakeen, to the poor and the needy. There's also another group that is deserving of zakah. There's 8 groups that you'll find in this ayah. إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل. So when he talks about المؤلفة قلوبهم, المؤلفة قلوبهم, their hearts. مؤلفة means the hearts that need to be bought, or the hearts that need to be brought in. The Prophet ﷺ, a part of the zakat, he would give it to those new Muslims whose Islam were still weak, and it was a way of buying their loyalty. It was a way of giving them incentive to be stronger Muslims. So he would give these people a lot of wealth. So Abu Sufyan, Sakhr ibn Harb, he gave him, and he asked him for himself, so he gave him. Then he asked for his wife, so he gave him. Then he asked for his son, so he gave him. And he gave him so much wealth that Abu Sufyan said, Ya Rasulullah, كيف أحمله? How do I take all this? I can't take all this. أرسل إلي من يحمله معي. Send someone to carry this with me. And he told him this, alayhi salatu wasalam. He told him, أخذته وحدك فاحمله وحدك. You took it on your own, Abu Sufyan, so carry it on your own. Carry it by yourself, Abu Sufyan. It was more symbolic than it was, it was more figurative than it was literal. Abu Sufyan obviously brought someone to help him carry it, but he understood the message. Like, you took this, you're responsible for it. Be ready. You're carrying it. You carry it alone. You carry the responsibility of what I gave you in front of Allah by yourself, because you took it by yourself. And I find that to be very profound. Remember that in life. Whatever it is that you're given, whatever you carry it by yourself. You have to take care of it. On the Day of Judgment, you have to argue your way through. You have to have a good explanation of what you did with it. You took it. You carry it. That's what he told him. Abu Sufyan is like, I was telling someone to help me carry. No, you took it. You carry it. This is you. I'm giving it to you, but you have to understand that you carry it. And to me, that's just very, very meaningful. I don't think I have time to tell you the story. It's hard not to tell it, but I'll leave it until next time, inshallah. A lot of things happened during the 48 hours. This is like the most condensed 48 hours of Seerah that I have. A lot of things happened in these 48 hours. 2 days where the Prophet ﷺ, after Hunain, was giving away the ghanaim. A lot happened. Why? Because naturally, when there's a lot of money involved, a lot of interest is involved as well. So people remember everything. There's a lot of money. So people were watching and listening, and everything that happened was remembered that day. And the Prophet ﷺ was giving, and as he was standing there giving, I'll tell you this story, and then there's a kahoot, inshallah, so I'll give you guys maybe another 3 or 4 minutes, and you guys can run it. Okay, good. So I'll tell you this one story, and then we'll continue next week. So the Prophet ﷺ is giving away the ghanaim. By the way, he took away nothing that day, but we'll talk about that later. He's giving away the ghanaim, and a man comes from behind him. The Prophet ﷺ is wearing a burd nijrani, ghalid al-hashiyah. He's wearing a burd. The burd is the thing that comes on top of this that you can just take off. If you've ever seen it, that's a burd. So he's wearing that, ﷺ, and it has a heavy collar. It's a very thick collar, and it's buttoned up in front. So the man comes and he takes the Prophet ﷺ by the collar like this, and he twists his arm. So the Prophet ﷺ is now, this is stuck to his throat. He can barely breathe. يقول أعطني من مال الله لا من مالك ولا من مال أبيك. Give me from the wealth of Allah. I don't want your wealth or the wealth of your father. MashaAllah. Adab, yani amazing. Amazing adab. Again, how he did not turn around alayhi salatu wasalam and just yani مسح الأرض فيه. I don't know how. But wallah, I don't understand how he does it. Like how he took nothing with him that day, alayhi salam. All he cared about was taking care of these people, and yet he comes from behind him and he twists his arm. Of course, Umar sees this. Umar cannot pull his sword quickly enough. Like he cannot, his sword's already out, and this man's head is going to be rolling in a minute. So the Prophet alayhi salam is telling everyone, leave him. يقول يا أخ العرب دعني أعطيك, just let me go and I will give you. So he let him go. فقال خذ هذا يرضيك. How about, there's an amount of wealth, take all this. قال لا كفيت ولا وفيت. This is not good and this is not enough. So the Sahaba قال in one of the riwayat قال فسمع للصحابة شخيرا. You can hear the Sahaba literally breathing heavy. They're getting really upset with this with the manner of this man. But the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام قال ادخل معي, come with me. So he takes him and he enters a tent. فقال أعطيك كذا يرضيك. لا, no. طيب وكذا, I'll add this. يرضيك, this is good enough? No. وكذا, he kept on adding. قال حتى قال نعم رضيت. نعم رضي, جزاك الله عني خير, I'm happy. فقال يا أخي أخرج فقل ما للناس ما قلت لي فإنهم وجدوا في قلوبهم عليك شيئا. I need you to come out with me and say to the people what you just said to me, because they are very upset with you in the way that you kind of acted. So how about you come out and you just say that to them. فقال نعم. So he comes out and he says, اللهم ارحمني ومحمدا ولا ترحم معنا أحدا. Oh Allah, show mercy to me and Muhammad and no one else. فقال لقد حجرت واسعا يا هذا. This is something very واسع, the rahmah of Allah. You've made it so small. But he takes the wealth and he walks away. And sallallahu alayhi wa sallam turns to the Sahaba. And I'll end with this story. He says, مثلي ومثلكم ومثل هذا الرجل. My example, the example of me and this man and you, is the example of a man who lost his camel. And people want to get his camel for him. So the more they run after his camel, the farther his camel runs away. And he is saying, leave my camel, I will get my camel. And they keep on running after his camel, and his camel is running farther away until they listen to him. And then he picks up a little bit of hashish, a little bit of grass from the earth, وَيُحَرِّكُ بِهَا يَدَيْهِ, and he moves it in his hands like this. So the camel comes running to him. قال ولو تركتكم وما أردتم لكان من أهل النار. And if I left you to do to him what you were hoping to do to him, he would have been from أهل النار. He's someone who came and he mistreated the Prophet ﷺ and was rude. He would have deserved punishment. But I didn't let you do it, and now this is what I think his motto was. One more soul to Jannah. That's what I think his motto was. I don't have evidence that he said that, but that's what I think it is. I think it's just one more soul to Jannah. One by one. We'll get you to Jannah one by one. And every time I have an opportunity to get one more person to Jannah, I'll get that person to Jannah. It's hard, but it's difficult, but if the price is his ego, alayhi salatu wasalam, no problem. If the price is my ego, no, that's easy. That's cheap. I'll pay that. I'll pay that price every day of the week. If getting someone to Jannah, the price is my ego, paid, done, no problem, no problem. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Why just one more soul to Jannah? Just by a little bit more, just a little bit of patience, a little bit of compassion and tenderness, and the man would go back to his people. I have 17 minutes. You guys have enough 17 minutes worth of material? Okay, good. So I'll end with that. We have, I have obviously maybe 5 or 6 more stories within the Battle of Hunain, and probably the most important story of Battle of Hunain I haven't told you yet. I'll tell you inshallah ta'ala next week. In the next 10 minutes before Salat al-Isha, before Adhan al-Isha, the brothers have prepared a kahoot, especially for the younger people here. So they'll put it up, and you guys can participate in the kahoot. And if you want to get maybe freshen up or older, make wudu until Salat al-Isha, then you're welcome to do that. Inshallah, subhanahu wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. جزاكم الله خيرا. بارك الله فيكم. You want this?
Should I not make it full screen? All right, Assalamu alaikum. We're going to get started very shortly because we don't have that much time. So if you guys want to enter the code in Kahoot, it's 2220509. There's going to be gift cards for the winners, 3. The code is 2220509. Is this too loud? Are you guys ready? There's a limit of 100 players, unfortunately. So the first 100 people who join, if there's 100 people. Oh.
No, if it's a fake, you only 10 people. So.
You're crazy. Yeah, it says player limit reached.
Start it. Nah, just start it. Just start.
Okay, we're going to start. Okay, there's not that many people, so if you guys want to group up for those who did get in, because unfortunately there's only 10 players allowed. Okay, first question. The Battle of Hunain was fought against the Jews, the Roman Empire, Hawazin and Thaqif, or Quraysh? MashaAllah, you guys, majority of you guys got that right, MashaAllah. Okay, next question. So we have Basil number 1, MHT number 2, and High number 3. Okay, second question. How many Muslims fought in the Battle of Hunain? Was it 1,200? Oh, MashaAllah. You guys all got that right, MashaAllah. Except one person. Next question. Okay, Bassett is still number 1. We have MM number 2, MHT number 3, and High number 4. Third question. When did the Battle of Hunain occur? Was that after the conquest of Mecca? Was that before the conquest of Mecca? Was that after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, or was that before the Treaty of Hudaybiyah? Okay, MashaAllah. Majority of you guys got that right. Only 2 people didn't get that right. Bassett is now number 2. High is number 1. Who's High? Okay, MashaAllah. Okay, how many did the Muslims have to face in the Battle of Hunain? Did they have to face 200,000, 20,000, 2,000, or 200? Oh. The 8 people got that right again. Didn't change. MashaAllah. Question 5. What surah contained the verses about the Battle of Hunain? Was it Surah Al-Kahf, Surah Al-Anfal, Surah Al-Tawbah, or Surah Al-Baqarah? MashaAllah. So it looks like the same 8 people are getting the answers right. And like the other 3 just don't know what they're doing. Okay, we can go to the next question. Okay, what were the names of Abu Lahab's sons? There's one more person has to answer. Just go to the next one. Okay, never mind. MashaAllah. One person got it wrong though. Basid. Okay, which daughter of the Prophet ﷺ married Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu? Was it Zainab? Was it Kulthum? Was it Fatima or Ruqayya? Which one was it? This one, majority of you guys got it correct, but lots of you didn't get it correct. It was Kulthum. Okay, true or false? Taqif and Huwazin were always rivals of Quraysh. If you were listening, you'd know this. Is it true or false? Wow. You guys are getting, a lot more of you guys are getting them wrong. The leaderboard, Hani Omar is now in third place. Hai and Aqib are first and second. What did the Prophet ﷺ call out to the fleeting Muslims? Did he call out, "O Muhajirin and Ansar"? Did he say, "O Muslims"? Did he say, "O the people of the pledge of Aqaba"? Or did he say, "O followers of Muhammad"? This one, again, if you were listening, you guys would definitely know this one. MashaAllah. Let's try and get one question where everyone gets it completely right. It's still the same leaderboard. What is the ratio of the Muslim army to the oppositions in the Battle of Hunain? Was it over half? Was it 33.3%? Was it 3/4 or was it less than 10%? MashaAllah. Oh, Hani Omar just moved to second place. Hai has some competition now. Okay, in whose house did the Akrimah and Safwan hide in during the conquest of Mecca? Those are the four options. Nine people got that. That was really easy. Sheikh Hanan literally answered one of those questions. You guys all should have gotten that. Oh, Aqib, you got that one wrong. The Battle of Hunain was fought in an open plot of land. Or was it? True or false? MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Hani Omar just moved to first place. Who was given the keys to the Kaaba? Uthman ibn Talha, Umar ibn Khattab, Abu Sufyan, or Uthman ibn Affan? Which one of those four? Oh, that one was bad. No one knew that one. Four people knew that one. Oh, Hani Omar moved down back to second place. Hai is back in first. The Battle of Hunain was mentioned by name in the Quran. Is that true or false? Is the word Hunain mentioned in the Quran? It is true. MashaAllah. We can move on to the next one. Hai continues to be in first place. Hani Omar fell off the leaderboard, man. Who tried to kill the Prophet during the Battle of Hunain? Was it Abu Lahab? Was it Utbah ibn Abu Lahab? Was it Abu Sufyan? Or Shayba ibn Uthman? It was Shayba. Hani Omar is back in second. I think we have the last question. So, what were the lessons learned after the Battle of Hunain? Was it do not be proud of your numbers or size? Was it always have grit and stand your ground? Was it a bigger in group is always better, or give up if you know you're going to lose? You can select two. You can select 2 or 3 or 4. There's multiple right answers in this one, but some of them are wrong. Oh, mashallah. Okay, let's see the leaderboard. In third place, we have Aqib. MashaAllah. Second place, we have Hani Omar. And first place, drum roll. Hi. So if you guys want to come grab your gift cards, inshallah, and Asha prayers in 5 minutes. So Jazakallah khair. We'll see you guys next week, inshallah.